Namaste, beautiful soul. Welcome to the Blooming Lotus Healing Channel. My name is Jikara, and I'm a spiritual healing facilitator. And I am so excited about today's video. Usually, I bring practitioners live on Thursdays. However, this practitioner in particular couldn't make it on a Thursday, and she's so special that I wanted to make sure that I got her in so that you could receive some of her essence and her knowledge. So this is going to be a little different. It's pre-recorded. However, all of the goodness and the essence of her is going to shine through, I'm pretty sure. And of course, feel free to add any comments or questions after you watch the video, and then I'll make sure that I tag her as well on YouTube, so that if you have any questions for her, then you can connect with her directly. And I will be sharing some information as well on her, on how to connect with her. But before we get started and talk about what we're going to talk about today, I just wanted to drop into gratitude for those of you who are part of the Cosmic Light Activation. For those of you who are connecting to this channel for a while and are part of the membership program, thank you so much. It means so much to me that you're supporting. I'm going to put your names here as a way of celebrating you. And as we celebrate you, I celebrate myself and celebrate this channel. I'm so grateful for your presence. And if you want to support this channel, make sure that subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, or like and share this video if you feel like this video is going to help someone that you love. And if you're interested in joining this Cosmic Light Activation membership to support the channel a little further, then I want to invite you to head over to my website, thebloominglotushealing.com/cosmic-light-activation. And you will get weekly guidance, oracle guidance, through a special portal that we have set up for everyone. I usually drop in a oracle guidance every Monday, and then every month we we gather together via Zoom, and we do Akashic clearings, Akashic record clearings for the collective, for the group. So it's a really great container. We also have a Telegram channel and a Telegram group where everyone is kind of leaning on each other and supporting each other, which is so great. We're really a thriving small community, and I'm looking to expand this family. So please consider signing up. And so that's it. So enough about that. I kind of wanted to bring in who I am bringing in today. So I met a beautiful, lovely meditation teacher at a yoga studio that I've been going to for about 2 months now. And I was guided to move my body, because I sit a lot and I do a lot of work, sitting down, via Zoom with my clients. And my spirit guides were like, listen, like, you need movement. And I actually connected with her for the first time I went to this yoga studio. She was the one that I connected with, and I was so grateful because of the way that she invited me to connect with my body from a place of compassion. And I was coming from attending a gym where it was kind of more like, push your body and go harder. And then going into her class, it was just like, oh my gosh, I actually was in tears afterwards, because I realized that I am kind of hard on myself sometimes, and I push my body too hard at times. And so she kind of brought in that essence of compassion into movement into my life. And I'm so grateful for her to teach us this. And so the person that I'm talking about is Libby, and she's from Essential You Yoga. And I'm going to bring her in so that you can get to know her a little bit more, and so she can share her story. So I'm going to bring her in here. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome, Libby. I'm so grateful for you for saying yes, for your sacred yes to spending some time with me today and sharing your amazing energy and knowledge and essence. And I'm just so grateful for you. Words cannot describe, again, like what I was mentioning earlier, how being in your presence and the way that you teach yoga has shifted the way I am starting to look at my body and the way I'm bringing movement into my body. But before we get started, start talking about yoga, because we're going to talk about yoga for everyone, right? I kind of wanted to see if you could share a little bit about yourself, and how do you get to doing what you're doing today?
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for doing what you're doing and for sharing some of your time with me. I really appreciate it. I was introduced to yoga in 1998, and from within the first few classes that I took, I was already sharing it with my friends. I would go and do something in class and I would go out and say, "Oh, look at this, look how cool this feels." So from the moment I stepped into this space of combining breath and movement, I was really excited to share the practice. I was officially certified at the 200-hour level, which is if you were going to compare to college degrees, clearly a college degree takes longer, but 200 is kind of like your bachelor degree.
Okay.
500 would kind of be your master degree. So I did my 200-hour training in 2011, 500-hour in 2018. And I'm working on my yoga therapy right now, which is 800 hours. It's kind of like getting a doctorate in yoga. Again, not nearly as much work as a real doctorate. I don't want to take away from that PhD work, but just to kind of think about these levels of training. And I'll be finished with that training in January, this upcoming January.
Wow, that's incredible. And I love, so how were you introduced to yoga in the first place? Like, I'm just kind of curious to know, how did you even get into that first class? Because I'm pretty sure, that first class was probably different. Now I mean, you're becoming a doctorate on yoga. So, but I'm pretty sure that first day of class was probably like, okay, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. So how was that experience for you? And how did you even get introduced to yoga?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like my first introduction wasn't even called yoga, which I love that introduction because it's stealth, right? You override that tendency that people have to avoid stuff that they consider woo, and you just give them the experience. So for me, that was in junior high school. I think somebody's mom came into the library and had us place our hands and our heart and our belly and connect with breath. And to this day, that's still one of my favorite yoga techniques. We laid on the ground, we let our bodies relax. It's a deep reset of the nervous system. I knew none of that, but I knew that I felt good afterwards. And then my first official classes were lucky enough at the college where I got my undergrad degree. So USF has a great gym open to students, and there was a weekly yoga teacher there. So I would go, I would move, I would get out of class, and I would light a cigarette because I was a smoker back then. And I'm laughing because I eventually got to the point where I was aware of how I was breathing and how that nicotine and smoke inhalation affected that. But, it didn't matter. Everyone just starts from where they are and the practice works.
I love that. And it's so interesting. So your journey started with something as simple as connecting to your breath and feeling into that, and then moving into movement, which is, that's incredible. You had a weekly yoga teacher in class. And then also, what I find interesting is that this is something you've said in, also at the studio, is like, we want to meet people where they are. And you were meeting yourself where you were at. There was no necessarily, there was no judgment around what you were doing at the time, whether you were smoking cigarette, but you were just noticing and becoming aware, and then making those shifts and changes for yourself. That's incredible. So that it's easy to say then, based on what you're mentioning, that a yoga practice can really help us bring a lot of self-awareness, right?
Yeah, there's actually a Sanskrit word for that I love. It's this word called svadhyaya. And one translation of svadhyaya is this idea of deep study of the self. And I think as we're moving in yoga, one of the things that we're looking at are the habits that we fall into in our lives. And very often, your yoga practice will be a postural practice. You're moving through the different postures. And when we do that, we're aware of like, oh gosh, I've got tightness in my shoulder. Maybe I've got a habit of doing this. And I know for myself, when I was 18, that was my habit. It wasn't this dramatic, but I didn't realize I was always kind of shoulders up towards my ear. There was a lot of tension here. But as you're moving, you're not only becoming aware of that tension, which helps you notice and release it when you're not on the mat, but you're also giving yourself an active tool to let go of it. So yoga
Mm.
gives us this tool to know ourselves more deeply physically. And then within all of that, we're starting to notice our thought patterns. We're starting to notice what messages we give ourselves regarding what we can do in the world and what we can't do. even emotional and energetic patterns. All of this can get uncovered in a yoga practice because it's all happening on one level or another. Even though from the outside, it might just look like we're lifting our arms up and coming into forward bends. There's a lot of different layers that are present.
I love that. So it's just, it goes beyond just the movement of the body. And so I kind of wanted to, because I know that right now you're running a workshop for beginners, for people who haven't done yoga before. Maybe they're starting out or maybe restarting. And I kind of wanted to ask you about this. So going back to the, to someone maybe that is watching this, and maybe they're feeling called to go do yoga, but they're scared or they're feeling maybe insecure about it. What would you tell someone like that, that is maybe on the verge, but they're still feeling a little shy about showing up to a studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a really big misconception in folks who don't do yoga that you really need to be flexible to do yoga. Whereas flexibility is the byproduct of yoga. It's not even a goal. It's just something that kind of happens as you start to move. I like to compare it with the idea of you can't eat unless you're full, right? So if your belly's not
Mm.
full, then you can't eat. Whereas eating is what gives us a full belly. You don't need to come to the table with a full belly. So I think that's rule one, is there's always a way to move from wherever you are. And that's the case whether you're kind of stiff because you have a desk job and you sit a lot, all the way up to if you're in a bed in a hospital or if you're bound to a wheelchair. There's always ways to introduce movement in yoga.
Mm.
Essentially, though, the foundation of any yoga practice is going to be your breath. So if you can breathe, you can do yoga.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you for that. And it's such a simple way to look at it. And I think sometimes we may overcomplicate it ourselves because there's so many things that we think about. Like I know for me personally, I I don't necessarily experience what other people have told me they experience, but I have had people tell me, "Oh, I don't think I can do it because, I'm too big, or I'm not flexible enough, or this is just uncomfortable, or I don't people are going to look at me crazy, or people get like, you get in your head basically." And one of the things that I think I told you this, when I had a teacher, the first time I ever got introduced to yoga ever was back in 2005, 2006. And my yoga teacher, she was a big voluptuous woman, and I just loved being able to see her just move her body, and she was so compassionate with her body, right? And I always go back to her image for whatever reason. I always go back to her every time I do my sessions with you or any other teacher, because it's a reminder that I don't have to look like the pictures, what it's basically marketed out there. We see like these beautiful bends. I mean, I think they're gorgeous, but that I feel that we kind of miss the point of yoga, which is the practice, right? I feel like that's really the essence, is the practice itself that really brings the benefits in, and then whatever else just kind of drops into that. So and I kind of wanted to ask you about, because you have this workshop, and you're teaching people. So tell us a little bit about this workshop, because it is for beginners. And you were mentioning something about being able to, I guess, listen to your body based on whatever position that you're doing. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about this workshop and the benefits of this workshop for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this workshop actually was postponed when I was initially speaking with you about, but in any class that I do, what I'm going to be talking about is helping you find the pose in your own body. So, like you said, we've got this image on the one side, you might have seen on a cover of a yoga magazine or on Instagram when people say, oh, this is what a warrior pose should look like, for example. And instead of taking this outward image and forcing your body into it, what I like to have people do is close their eyes. So that way you're kind of taking a whole visual out of it and you're feeling in your body. And with your eyes closed, you're not trying to like look down to see what's aligned. You're not trying to look at a mirror. You're really just feeling in your body and noticing where am I cutting that flow of breath, right? Because so often that's where the tension is. For example, my low back. I know for me, I'm real guilty of this. I'll kind of get that sway back, which comes from years of wearing heels, where I'm kind of pressing my hips forward, crunching into the low back. But when I'm really able to connect with my body in a pose, I'll notice that I'll kind of lengthen naturally, and then I'll feel my breath more. And when you feel your breath more, you just feel everything start to open. So it's really so much less about what it looks like from the outside, because on the outside it might look like something very simple. And I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but it's so true, because there's this surface layer of yoga, and then there's this real depth to the practice that it's not visual. It's this psychological, breath-based, energetic-based practice that underlies this surface of all the different postures that we do.
Mm, I love that you're saying about closing our eyes, because there really is that, and you're right. I know that when I open my eyes and I'm looking, typically I'm looking at the teacher and I'm trying to just copy what the teacher is doing. But something that I've noticed too is that the position's going to look differently for everyone, right? And I mean, I'm sure that you can see that as a yoga teacher. I'm sure you see your students and everyone is doing the position a little differently. And I noticed that one of the things that you have done, which I really love, when you come around and you're like, okay, does this feel better? Like you notice certain positions that that may be improved, right? And then in feeling that openness and that breath. And so what, you know, how can you tell? Because this is just a question that how can you tell that the positioning could be improved at that moment for someone from the outside looking to your, to your students and to your class?
That's such a good question. And I just want to pick a little at that idea of improving, because sometimes I have an idea and it's not true, which is why I always like to do the check-in. I'll offer an adjustment, and then if the student says, no, it felt better the other way, my answer is always, go back to what feels good in your body.
Hmm.
But very often, if I notice a pained expression on somebody's face, they might be trying to force their body into something. Listening to people breathe, our breath is such a teacher. When I see somebody holding their breath or they're kind of breathing raggedly, that's a really good cue that something isn't quite going right in their body in that shape.
Oh wow, that's incredible. I love that. And that's true. I have noticed that sometimes with certain positions I may be pushing myself a little too much. So then I'm like, okay, let me give myself a break. And so, and that, I also noticed that for me personally, I've noticed that sometimes, which this has been shifting, but sometimes it would be like, no, I can do this, and then just keep pushing yourself. And so, what would you say to someone that maybe is, in that position, and they're kind of having a hard time breaking away from that pattern? Because I feel like that shows up in the world a lot, like the hustle mentality, especially in the gym. You got to go harder. It has to hurt, otherwise you're not doing it right. Like there's really a lot of that in the world, and so it's very hard for us to kind of step away from that. What would you recommend for someone that maybe is trying to break away from that pattern, when they notice that that's happening for them?
Yeah, and you're right. It's such a human thing to do, is to try to really strive and reach an ideal. And we do so much of that. Yoga really is about inviting that compassion in. One of my favorite sayings is that we call it a yoga practice, not a yoga perfect. So as we're doing it, we're just moving. And the other part is just bringing in this idea of levity to the practice. There's another Sanskrit word for that, which is lila, and it's inviting like a playfulness into your practice. A really fun example of this is if you're doing a tree pose where you've got like one foot on the ground, the other, your knee is kind of bent out at the side with your foot on the inside of your long leg. We're not trying to be straight trees here, right? Sometimes we'll be like, well, let's pretend we're in a hurricane and we're kind of losing our balance and we're moving all around. And it's just this idea of it doesn't have to be serious. So if you find yourself in a pose and you notice like, oh gosh, I'm pushing myself, like number one, congratulations that you notice that. That's just huge in and of itself. Like, okay, here's a pattern about myself that I'm noticing. And I know I do it more than just here on a yoga mat. So that in itself is svadhyaya. Like that's one huge amazing thing that you've just done. And then you can decide how would it feel to not push myself here.
Mm.
Sometimes it's like, oh gosh, I'm clenching my jaw and that's not doing anything, right? And then you relax your jaw and all of a sudden the posture becomes more comfortable. Sometimes it might be like using that example of tree pose. Maybe I'm going to put my foot down and bring it up. Maybe I'm going to make it more of like I'm coming in and out rather than trying to just stay perfectly balanced the whole time. And sometimes it's as simple as just kind of shifting, like where are my feet on the ground? Maybe they need to be closer together, wider apart. So this idea of exploration and just throwing out perfection.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love what you said, exploration and staying curious and joyful. You know,
Yeah.
it just brings such a different energy, right? Such a different feeling when we think about yoga, yoga practice being joyful, and also an opportunity for exploration and an opportunity for flexibility in our mind, right? Because
Yeah.
beyond the flexibility in the body, but the flexibility in the mind, to give ourselves permission to, okay, let me get curious, or let me get joyful, let me get playful. And so I love that so much, and it makes my heart open up so much when you said that. It's just like, yes, that felt so good. And I'm definitely gonna make sure that I apply that for my own practice. And another thing I wanted to ask you too, because this is something that you know people, I know, even for me, and if I have this question, I'm sure other people have it too. We talk about yoga practice, and there's people who have a yoga practice that's like daily. They do it every day at one time, 40 minutes, whatever. I'm not there yet, to be honest with you. And so what would you consider a yoga practice? Like a once a week yoga practice, an everyday yoga practice? What is considered a yoga practice? Because I sometimes feel like, I don't know, am I a yogi yet?
Yes, you
you
are.
know?
Yes, you are. I feel like yoga is this practice that it has so many different pieces of what is yoga that there's this space for a yoga practice to evolve over a lifetime. So
Mm,
when you zoom out from that every day, every week into a lifetime, where's the consistency happening? So I think a yoga practice is something that's realistic for your life, right? So if you
mm,
are raising a family, taking care of the elders, running a business, your yoga practice might look very different than somebody who's in an ashram where their only responsibility is meditating and doing yoga. So there's this idea of where are you in life and what makes sense for you. There's also the idea of like, how was your day? Sometimes I wake up and my body's sick or I'm feeling really tired. My
mm,
goal is to wake up at 5:15, roll out of bed and do my practice. But sometimes that practice is a body scan where I'm not moving my physical body and I'm doing this mental energetic practice and I'm awake, I'm doing my practice, but in that moment, that's what I needed. And I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be calmer throughout the day. So I think part of a yoga practice is just skillfully observing what you need in a moment. Sometimes it's going to be a breathing session. Sometimes it's going to be going to your favorite yoga teacher for an hour and like practicing in community. And sometimes it might be like a couple forward bends when you get lunch break. So I think whatever it looks like, it's not for anyone else to define.
I love that so much. Thank you for that. Because I know, in this day and age, we have the Instagram yogis and the people who are posting their daily routines. And it is a known fact that doing following social media sometimes can be detrimental to our mental health. So
Absolutely.
there's this idea of perfection, right? That kind of comes up for, I know it comes up for me. So if it comes up for me, I know it comes up for others. And so I was thinking, I was like, well, how, where do I exist in the, so what you're saying is that there is a range, right? And the range, wherever you exist, is perfect for you. And so I love that so much. So thank you for answering that. I feel so much better.
Good, good. And it's not just me. Like if you read the yoga philosophy books, they talk about this idea of us moving through these different cycles in our lifetime so that when we're
Mm,
younger, you've got that more energetic practice, that one where, you see maybe on TV the people just pouring sweat and are moving all the time. And then you've got that like householder stage where you're kind of holding down a job and a family and your practice looks different then versus our older age and what does our practice look like as our body ages, and they're all going to be
wow.
different.
I love that. Like entering into the cycle, right? Of and recognizing the cycle that we're in, and being compassionate with ourselves, not comparing ourselves to anyone else, because we're not only we are on a part of a cycle, but that cycle is going to look different for each one of us. So thank you for that, and I hope that for all of you who are watching this, you get inspired to continue your practice or to start your practice. And so, okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you about today is there something that you can recommend for people who are in meditate like who do meditation? Are there any asanas that are good for preparing for meditation? Because I have some meditators here on the channel. And so, are there any asanas that you recommend for people who, before they start their meditation, that could potentially improve their meditation?
Yeah, so you've actually nailed the original reason that yoga was developed thousands of years ago. It wasn't to make a perfect picture, but it was to move your body and prepare it to sit in meditation. So if you're a meditator and you're thinking like, gosh, I want to sit down for a few minutes, I can't say there's any one asana that's going to fit everyone, right?
Okay.
But it's this idea of tuning in with your body and noticing the patterns of movement and then doing the opposite of that. So, for
Mm.
example, if you're sat in a chair a lot of the time, an opposite would be like laying on your back and doing a bridge pose, lifting your hips up and your arms over your head. So you're maybe changing relationship to gravity, but you're doing the opposite shape of that kind of rectangle sat down shape. Or maybe it's like this really nice back bend where maybe you're on your belly and you're up in cobra or stretching your arms behind you. Um, it could be a downward dog where your spine is nice and long. So it's going to look different depending on what you're doing with your body. But a good rule of thumb is to think about your spine and moving it in all the different directions. So moving it
Oh.
to the side and to the other side, backwards and forwards, like into a twist in both directions.
Oh wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it makes sense. Like almost like doing like a full circle for the spine, for that, that movement for the spine. Because I mean when you're sitting down, you're I mean, especially with meditation, you're sitting down for a long time. So it makes sense that you want to make sure that the entire circle, I guess, of your circumference inside of you is clear, and I guess rebalanced a little bit. And
Well,
acknowledge.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, no, it's okay.
I think that when you're thinking about that and you're also kind of thinking about limiting your breath, our goal in meditation is to effortlessly sit with our spine nice and long, right? And so the effortless is a huge part of that. Because if you're uncomfortable and in pain, then your mind is going to be focused on that, right? That's an extra challenge. It's not necessary for meditation. So, honestly, if a chair works for you, if you want to use some support of a pillow, none of that is cheating. It's all getting yourself into a position where you can sit with that nice long spine, which aligns all of these energetic centers of the body. Your breath can move more easily, and then you can get that meditative connection to your center.
Mm. Speaking of centers, so tell us a little bit about yoga and the energy centers. Um, what is the relationship between the like? I know that there's things such as sun salutations, and I don't know if those hit all the energy centers. I don't want to say hit, but address all energy centers or not. Again, I know that that's something that or a practice that a lot of people follow, or it's I guess it's a common practice. So is there I don't want to say a goal, but is there, I'm going to say for the purpose of this question, a goal. is there a goal in the practice to be able to connect to all of the energy centers in your practice on a daily basis? Is that something that we should be aware of or looking into?
So the short answer is no. You don't.
Okay.
You don't need to necessarily be aware of the energy centers. Because of my background studying yoga and yoga anatomy, we call those centers the chakras. I'm sure you're familiar with that term, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when you start to study the chakras, you understand how they can coordinate with different areas of the body. For
Mm.
example, that root chakra that sits at the base of the spine connects with issues of your legs, of your lower body, your knees, and your feet. And so, if you're thinking about the energetic system, you might think about, okay, physically, here's one thing to do. And then the chakras are an energetic thing too. So, energetically, how can I bring, sticking with that example, my root chakra into balance? I can eat grounding foods, might be one way. Each center has a different color. So maybe I'll wear that color that coordinates with this energy center that I'm trying to balance. I'm an essential oils girl, so maybe I'll get some oils that will balance, or like wear some earrings or a necklace, a stone that will bring it into balance. So there's all these different tools, and yoga and asana is one tool. Meditation and breathing are two other tools. But then when you start to study the chakra system, you just broaden that understanding of different tools to work with. But it's
Mm.
fascinating. I would love to do a whole other episode with you about the chakras, because they're so layered and there's so much information to share about them. But skimming the surface, I think it's fun to learn about, but you don't need to know a thing about them in order to have an impactful yoga practice.
That's so powerful. Well, let me tell you what. I think I'm gonna have to have you come back for that because I'm gonna tell you right now, everyone on this channel loves anything that has to do with the chakras, with the energy centers. They want to learn all. We all want to learn. So we'll definitely. And when you said essential oils, I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to talk about that too because I'm kind of curious to know how we can, that's an additional tool, right? That we can include there. So that sounds exciting. And so, all right. So, well, for the purpose of this conversation, which is, bringing it back to, making yoga for everyone. We've talked about we can start wherever we are, right? You can be, you know, uh, in bed. You can be, maybe not as flexible as you think you should be. You can practice yoga, and it could be basically um, in your, catered, right? You can cater it to your own body and what you need at the moment. And so then there's no reason for us to be scared, right? To start going into a class. What would you recommend for someone who maybe is coming in to a studio for the first time, um, and then looking to build a relationship with their teacher, right? Because they may not know how to, maybe what to ask for, right? Like in relationship to making any shifts or changes. Is there something that you would recommend for someone that's coming into the studio for the first time? They don't know how to maybe change their body position. What could they do or say, or maybe even shift within themselves, so that they can make the yoga practice more joyful and exciting for them.
Okay, so a few things come to mind. One is, if it's your very, very first time in a yoga studio, if you're available, I would say try to come early, maybe like even 20 or 30 minutes early. A lot of yoga studios will have a form for you to fill out. So if you haven't done that online, it'll give you a chance to just fill that out, to maybe get a tour of the studio, learn where the bathroom is, learn where you're going to keep your stuff, and then get to talk to the teacher before class starts. The information as a teacher I always want to hear is if anything's limiting your movement. That might be a shoulder injury from 15 years ago. It might just be like, I'm just really stiff and I've never done yoga. And that's going to kind of cue me to keep an eye on you as we go into some poses that might affect that area of the body. It's not necessary though. Let's say you get there just as class is starting, and that's okay. A lot of people do on their first time, and you roll your mat out, grab a couple of yoga blocks. Most studios are going to have those, and grab a blanket. Blanket is awesome to put down. You can use it under your knees if your knees tend to get sore, if you're in any kneeling poses, which most yoga classes will at least have one pose when you're on your knees. And then the blocks are going to make the floor higher. So if you're like in a standing forward fold and your hands are kind of dangling and there's nothing underneath them, the blocks will lift the floor to you. And when you're able to ground through your fingers, the rest of your body is going to relax. They're also great if you're, for example, in a pose on the ground where you have one knee bent. If that knee is kind of up in the air, your hip flexors, I'm pointing to my shoulder because it mirrors the hips, but your hip flexors are going to kind of tighten up to hold your knee up. This is all happening unconsciously. But if you slip a block underneath that knee, your hip flexors are just going to relax and release. So our blocks aren't cheating. I think that's a huge piece to understand. A lot of folks have that in their mind. Oh, if I use this stuff, I'm cheating. I'm not doing it. No, what you're doing is you're bringing the floor to you. You're meeting your body where you are, and you're giving yourself permission to open up and respond to the practice. My other cue for newcomers to yoga class is there's going to be a period at the end of class called Shavasana. And a lot of folks come into yoga and they're not aware. So at the end of class, very often we'll lay down on our backs. We might use a blanket under our head. We might put a little like block or bolster under our knees to rest on. Folks close their eyes if they're comfortable with that, and we're laying down. You can think of it like nap time from preschool. The teacher might turn the lights out, might have really soft music on. This is still part of class. The purpose of Shavasana is to relax your nervous system, your mind, your body. It's this moment where you're not attempting to do anything. You're not even holding control over your breath. And that period of relaxation is where the benefits of your practice kind of soak in. And I see a lot of folks when it's their first yoga class or their first, few yoga classes are always kind of like picking their head up and looking around. They don't know what's going on, because how often do you get into a room full of strangers and take a nap?
That is so true.
Yeah. So I think it's good to just mentally know it's coming and then realize there's a purpose to it. It's not just a time killer. Like, it really is this idea of the English translation of Shavasana is it's our corpse pose, right? It's a little death. And the idea is that in our yoga practice, we're working on these patterns. Some might say the ego, and that part of us is dying. And when we sit up after Shavasana, it's this rebirth.
Oh, that touched me so much. That's incredible. Thank you for bringing that perspective. Now I am looking at yoga in such a different way. I'm like, thank you. This has been so incredible, and I'm just so grateful. And as we end this conversation, I kind of wanted to ask you one question. If there was one thing that you would have anyone start doing in their practice today, what would that be?
It's a practice called optimal breathing. And in this practice, you're breathing to your diaphragm, and you are observing and trying to invite these practices into your breath. So one of them is an equal inhale and an equal exhale. Another is eliminating any holding, retaining of the breath. So we don't want to inhale, hold the breath, exhale, hold the breath. We really want each breath to naturally come into the next. The third part is we don't want to be breathing loud, right? So we're not like, we shouldn't be able to hear our breathing. And the other piece is we don't want to have a raggedness to the breath. So when we're kind of hitching, that kind of goes with this anxiety, state of mind. And when you see someone have a panic attack, very often it's that, right? They can't catch their breath. So this optimal breath reaches the diaphragm as you breathe in. It's a complete release of all air as you breathe out. It's taking about the same amount of time to breathe in, to inhale, as it takes to breathe out. It's eliminating pauses between your inhale and your exhale, and between your exhale and your inhale. And it's smoothing the breath. So it's releasing that idea of a raggedness. And the final piece is it's meant to be effortless. So if you feel like you're working really hard trying to do this, maybe just lessen how much you're trying to breathe in and breathe out, right? So maybe that idea of equal length, maybe like you're counting in your head 10 seconds to breathe in, and maybe that's too long for you. So it's this deep knowing of the breath and then bringing yourself into the optimal breath, which when we do that, our mind responds. So we start to kind of let go of some of this anxiety, some of this frustration that can sit on us, and our heart responds. This is an ideal breathing to both circulate oxygen in our body and so that your heart's not working too hard. So I know it's not a yoga posture, but if anyone was going to start anywhere, I'd say that start with your breathing.
Thank you so much. I think that's powerful, and I love it because we can do it anywhere. We don't need any tools, anything. Just that knowledge of going into our diaphragm and counting in and counting out. So thank you so much for that. And I just wanna take a moment just to thank you for taking this time to share your knowledge, to share your energy here. I know that a lot of the people who are gonna watch this are gonna get so much value from what you've shared today. And for those of you who want to connect with Libby, I want to leave her website here. So her website is essentialyouyoga.com. And so that if you wanted to reach out to her, maybe especially if you're in the Tampa Bay area and you wanted to go to her classes and you want to kind of follow her in all of the different experiences that she's offering, then I want to invite you to go into her website so that you can connect deeper with her offerings. And I just, again, Libby, my heart is so full. It's so full.
Mhm.
And yes, and I'm just sending you an energetic hug and so much gratitude. And so for those of you who are here, thank you for watching. I will see you next time. And please let us know in the comments if you have any additional questions or if you have any comments. If you want to share some love for Libby, make sure you leave it on the comments below so that she can feel the love. And yeah, thank you all. Love you and namaste.
Namaste. Thanks, Jikara. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Thank you.